Hi, and welcome to Sacred Spaces. My name's Michaela Drieberg, and today we've definitely gone somewhere a little bit different. We're at the Boroondara General Cemetery, and some might say we're in the dead centre of Kew. Do you like that joke, Paul?
You're on the money this morning, Michaela.
So we're joined by Paul Coffey, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the significance of the cemetery where we are, and some memorials and special people that are in their resting places here. So welcome, Paul.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm well. So what's so significant about this cemetery where we are now?
The Kew General Cemetery, which we're in right now, has a number of notable Melburnians buried here. I'm most interested this morning, and as we'll see this morning, in the Annie Springthorpe Memorial. Annie Springthorpe Memorial I discovered when I was working as an apprentice carpenter back in the mid-1990s. And I came to this place as just out of general interest, working across the road over the other side of this large brick fence. And I came in here one day to discover a place that I previously didn't know existed, and it really took me by, I guess, surprise and imbued some sense of awe in me that a person could have such devotion, or could manifest such devotion to a former partner through a building. And it really is, as we'll see as we get more into the memorial itself, it really is quite an inspiring space, and an overawing sort of space. It really does sort of take you it really does take your emotions. So.
And that's something that's significant about this cemetery and cemeteries that are around the country and the world, is that it reflects how we approach death and remembering our loved ones. So this was initially built in the 1800s, is that correct?
Yeah, 1897, I think it was initially built, and it was built, as I said, as a marker of grief and loss by John Springthorpe, the noted doctor, to his wife Annie, who had died during whilst giving birth to their fourth son Guy in 1897, and he took him a very long time to get over that loss.
And then it was by itself in an acreage, and now it's surrounded by many other people that they might not have ordinarily hung around with.
No, and that's what I guess is also interesting about the cemetery and cemeteries in general, is that they're places where they're sort of condensed analogies of the city, and places where people sort of exist into perpetuity and eternity, where they may not have otherwise, associated in a social sense or in a physical sense in their general life as people within the city, or within the place that they had grown up and lived.
So, Paul, there's a number of significant features within this cemetery, but not only in terms of the memorial, but just the surroundings as well. So what are some other standout features here?
Well, you have the lovely gatehouse at the entrance to the cemetery, designed by Charles Vickers and Albert Purchas at the cemetery's inception. The cemetery, interestingly, was one of the first in Melbourne. I think it commenced about 1843, from memory. I could be wrong. But Charles Vickers, so Vickers and Purchas designed the gatehouse and the general layout for the cemetery, and
it's got a clock house as well. Is that right? Or clock tower, I should say.
Yeah, it's noted by its clock tower, which is approached by along High Street, and gives us a sort of formal entrance to the cemetery. Further to that, the ornamental brick fence with sort of broken wrought iron sections, which I believe align with the street entrances, the perpendicular street entrances coming into the cemetery, give it some notoriety. And I guess it's different in that sense to Melbourne General Cemetery and other cemeteries around the city, where which are not, I guess, divided in some sense by the city, from the city or from the outside public space by a long sort of continuous element, such as is the wall.
There's also some beautiful roses around when you're looking around too, and the significance of that garden surrounding that you're in.
There is, and the trees that we're standing under here right now have sort of grown and matured, and I think they're probably planted by Purchas near his death in 1907, after working here for 40 years. And they're sort of matured now to become to give us this lovely space that we're standing in right now. So yeah, it's quite a picturesque and quite a beautiful place of memoriam for those gone.
So speaking of memorials, I'm dying to take a closer look at the Springthorpe one. So just that way?
Yes, here it is behind us here. You might be able to see it. So let's go and have a look now.
Great. So Paul, we're at the Springthorpe Memorial now. What's the significance of its location within the cemetery?
Well, the location was chosen by Springthorpe himself and William Guilfoyle, the landscape architect who's known for designing the botanical gardens in Melbourne. They chose this plot here, which was originally an acre, which is very, very large for a cemetery, for its proximity, well, for its axial alignment with with the Dandenongs behind me here, and beautiful views right across to Mount Macedon and into the distance beyond.
Wow, so a beautiful resting place and for those that are coming to visit loved ones as well. Now tell us about this memorial because my God, it really is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is something. And as I said, I discovered it quite early in my life, and I've come back here not through any interest in cemeteries or memorials, but just for this place itself, because it is so sort of overpowering and such an interesting place. It was designed by Harold Desbonnier, who was a very noted and very, very skilled Victorian architect. As I said, William Guilfoyle designed the landscape. Bertram McKennell designed the sculpture commissioned by Dr. John Springthorpe. And Webb Gilbert was commissioned by Springthorpe to design the snakehead rainwater discharge gargoyles up on the eaves of the building.
I did think that was a little bit odd, but it all makes sense now. Now tell us about the columns.
Yeah, the columns are 12 black Labrador columns. Black Labrador granite comes from Scotland. Interestingly, in this building, and it's quite interestingly in that in buildings today, they're noted for the amount of international materials and parts and pieces that come from overseas. This building itself, and particularly these columns, were bought from northeast Europe, Britain, very, very long, in 1897. So there's a really international element to the building. Similarly, the sculpture of Annie Springthorpe herself lying on her tomb was also was inscribed as coming from London in 1900. Was designed by Bertram McKennell, again commissioned by Springthorpe. Dr. John Springthorpe had been accused of marrying Annie Inglis, as was her maiden name, to sort of access the family's wealth. And there's some rumours have persisted long since his death and the creation with regard to the creation of the memorial, and up to his death, that he had married her for the money, but the idea, or I guess the rumour is, to get to the point, is that he spent all of his money on this memorial as a
Tribute to his love.
As a tribute to his love and a demonstration that his love was not about accessing her family's wealth, but more it was about her, and so he I guess impoverished himself to demonstrate his love and his ongoing commitment to her.
And there's signage all around the memorial as well, which really tells the story that you've been sharing with us. And something that really stands out to me just here are the timelines. So, born in 1867, married in 1887, and then passed away in 1897. 30 years.
That's right. So she was only 30 when she died, and she died giving birth to their fourth child, Guy, who went on, I believe, to become a noted Melbourne psychiatrist. But yeah, there's this sort of, at every level of this place, there's this romance, that devotional romance that continues to sort of resonate, and as we can see by the inscription here. That's right. She died. She was married. She was born on Australia Day. Was married on Australia Day 20 years later, and died on Australia Day 10 years after that, as a still quite a young woman.
So, Paul, I also noticed that there's words along the top of the memorial. What language is it, and what does it mean?
There's various languages, mainly English and Cyrillic. I obviously don't know. I can't read Greek, so
Clearly, either do I.
no, no. So I'm not that familiar with what they are. But on each face, on each face of the gable pediments, we see words such as love, evermore, life, evermore, and it continues around the building, and there are, I guess, a reference to Springthorpe's faith in mankind, and his desire to have the memorial seen as something for his, I guess, primarily for his deceased wife Annie, but also as a as a broader statement to I think the capacity and the intent and endeavour that I think he saw, being a physician, he saw possible within the human condition.
Something else that really stands out about this memorial is this dome and the light from it and just the colour. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It really is quite something, and it's not something that you are immediately aware of as you approach the building. On approach, the building appears to be sort of this four gabled, pedimented, quite fantastic and imposing structure. But it's only when you get to here, where we are in this proximity to the building now, where you can begin to see up into the what is really quite a brilliant lead light, sort of fish scaled or Tiffany patterned lead light domed ceiling that, it really is quite something. The colours, again, chosen by Des Boroondara, the colours of that sort of reflect the sun, and being sort of red, orange, and even there's a few sort of white sort of tonal colours in there, and it provides a really great contrast to the darker hues and tones and the granite and the heavy black granite base of the building. So it sort of, again, with that idea of that of rising up beyond death and going to a greater space, and the access and communication of the heaven above and the earth below.
Now, this is a stunning memorial, but there are a number of significant resting places here as well. And something that stood out to me, we were talking to a gentleman when we arrived here, and you mentioned these are black Labradors, but he told us about a greyhound that's here as well. What's that story?
There is a greyhound that apparently was a notable fixture of the ceremony of the cemetery in life, and then had passed on, and is now immortalised in stone, I believe, down further as you move your way through the cemetery itself.
So it was a dog that found its owner's resting place and then chose to spend time there and was fed there by visitors, and then ended up resting with his owner there as well.
Correct, and is now immortalised in physicality and in the folklore of the cemetery. So, yeah, I guess cemeteries, it's a sign that cemeteries are places of life and death, and or not so much primarily death, but of life as well.
So a couple of other memorials that are quite significant here. What are they?
The Leo Cusson Memorial, which I think he was a notable Catholic Melburnian. Down further, there's quite a beautiful little Gothic structure, walled, different to this in that it's walled, and it has a much more conventional roof scape and plan and structure. The Syme family have memorialised themselves at the entrance to the ceremony behind us, at the entrance to the cemetery, sorry, behind us, with quite a beautiful Egyptian-esque memorial to the whole family, which is noted by the different floreation of each column around the perimeter of that memorial.
So there are so many different special places here. There are some significant people that have contributed to Melbourne and Victoria buried here as well. If you could choose a favourite feature or a special standout within here, or just this memorial, what would it be?
Well, certainly this memorial, and I really don't have that greater interest in the broader cemetery itself. In fact, I think it's not. I think it's largely indifferent from other cemeteries in a lot of senses. But it's this place here that I, on occasion, come back to just to remember. I guess maybe like Springthorpe had. The power of ongoing love and devotion, and the way that can be manifest in buildings, and the way buildings allow us to illustrate our lives and who we are as people, and the capacity for them to exist beyond us as people, and and to talk about where we were as a society and where we are, as where we would like to be, and I guess our aspirations as a society and as a community.
That was really deep, Paul. This has truly been one of the most, if not the most, sacred space that we've ever visited. So thank you so much for showing us around today. And it's quite serendipitous because it was All Hallows Eve last night, Halloween, and today's All Saints Day. So it's really, the timing is just immaculate that we're here today and learning more about a really significant place here in Boroondara.
Yes, timely nonetheless. So yes, happy All Saints Day. Happy Day of the Dead. Sorry.
Thanks again for showing us around. It's been wonderful to have you here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
My name's Michaela Drebeck. You've been watching Sacred Spaces, and we'll see you next time.